Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, I want to ramble on for a bit about some useful links. Some will be of my design, as we'll go through the build collection and some of my guides and other tools and things that I've made, but we'll also look at several other things made by other people as well, as there's definitely a lot of useful links to have, and especially seeing as we have a lot of returning and new players about, I felt it was warranted to make a video like this. And also, this will tide us over as I'm in the background working towards making a tipping scales in-depth look, but that needs a little bit more time to cook, so we'll leave it in the cooker for a little bit longer. But this especially as well will be pretty useful of a video. Everything will be linked down below, of course, as we'll go through these links. And yeah, they are very useful things to have. So yeah, let's go get started. And we'll start here with the build collection. This is the one that most people know me from anyway, but of course, yeah, it'll be linked down below if you didn't know it yet. And in here, I have basically all of the builds on all of my characters, and that actually includes 2 accounts, as this goes up to character 4 here, and then goes into a character 5 even, as the number before the dot is the character number, and then the number behind the dot is actually the loadout slots. That's actually how it is laid out for those that have wondered about that sometimes. And in here are basically what I have in game on my loadout slots. Because of that is basically all of the builds that I have, including even a few more than that, because we also have some builds that I no longer have at the bottom as X builds, and then also some joke ones towards the end there. And in here you can find, at least I hope, a lot of inspiration, but also some just good builds to copy from. When going into any of these build pictures, it just loads up as a Google drawing. And in here, I've basically put in what I feel is needed to copy the build from it. So we have the full layout of what the brands of it are, named items and exotic items, their names are there. The stats of the build are there, both in showing what we have equipped to it, together with that as well, showing what we have stat-wise and such, together with our talents. And then usually in the right side of it, below the stats, this whole section in the right side basically is me giving some recommendations. So here, for instance, we do have Frenzy and Killer as our on the build picture itself, but then I have a selection of talents that I would say are actually good picks for this. Together with, for instance, yeah, we can go Chest Striker, of course, instead. So as an option, or going Coyote. Usually as well, with the red builds and stuff, we have actually, that'll be behind my head a little bit, but we have the numbers for it. And in here as well, in the build collection, nowadays there's at the top, and usually you will be seeing it like this in list form. Here I've put it to grid form, and I generally recommend doing that. You also see the preview of the build this way. But at the very start, there's also some recommended folders. So for instance, in the strikers recommended as one of the more popular ones, we have a bunch of ways that strikers we can get set up. And also I've kind of ranked them here. Now the ranking really depends on what you're doing, especially of course, but also in these recommended folders, if you go to any of the build pictures in the top right, actually of them, it will actually kind of say what they are for. So this is a Coyote Obliterate AR generalist for most content. And some might be more saying that they are for legendary or incursions or such. And yeah, in these recommended folders, you can also find a ton of those builds. And in there as well, especially the reason I have those is that we can show some variations that, because in here, of course, these are the loadouts as I kind of have them saved in game. I don't have 20 strikers, but there is more than 20 ways to set up a striker, and a lot of them good. So yeah, we go through a lot of those like that. And yeah, in the other recommended folders, you can also find other recommendations like for buff builds and conflict and eclipse. As especially as well, not everything in the build collection is kind of recommended, as yeah, some is much more silly stuff, as for instance, we do have a 511 build here as just some silliness, but actually one that I enjoy for its challenge. But I want to recommend this, and because of that, we have these 2 files up here. And that is especially the recommended build list and the recommended weapons and talent list that we have here. If we go into those files, what we see here is in the recommended build list, I have a bunch of recommended builds, as it says on the header. Here especially as well, we're starting kind of recommendations for newer players to, for instance, make a striker, a simple striker, because that will get them into challenging content pretty easily. And strikers, just getting the few pieces will get you getting 4 pieces together, and just sticking whatever else on it will actually work pretty fine just because of the big bonus that the talent provides. And then we're going into some other red builds as recommended here. And then as well, we're going actually into just a big blob of different builds, a whole smorgasbord here. And we're starting kind of with tech tanks. And one of the reasons actually I don't have tech tanks as the top recommended is, for instance, yeah, we do need technician for it. We do need a memento for it. But this is, for instance, as well, here explained of being my personal choice for solo play, for instance, with these tech tanks. And especially as well, with each of these sections, I also have a little bit of an explainer as to what it is for, so that you can kind of understand these set of builds. For instance, the headhunters are great for 5 directive farming. Same, for instance, here with the fire eclipses being my personal choice as support CC build in heroic groups. And then, for instance, with this being very, for the foam eclipses being very good in legendary, for instance. And all of these links go through to the build collection. So if we open one up, yeah, we just see a build from the build collection linked through here. And yeah, this list is especially, of course, made as, yeah, not every build in the build collection comes recommended. And because of that, I eventually made a list like this, because if you just enter the build collection, it can be very daunting. It's not explained well. It's just, you know, for a large part, it just seems in a random order of things. And then this is kind of to make a little bit order in that chaos. Also, if you scroll down far enough, I make some recommendations here, for instance, for legendary and for raids and for incursion, for instance, what builds to go with. So, for instance, for legendary, going with a few strikers and then having a foam eclipse alongside. For instance, the raids, we also have a few tank layouts, which aren't actually recommended in general, but there are in this section, because for Iron Horse, for instance, we do need an hazard protected tank. And for instance, full healers for incursion and the raid and such. There are also some joke builds here, as yeah, I am fond of for instance, my purple builds here, as they can provide a lot of fun challenge, actually. They can create fun by just being so challenging, and running heroic with these is actually, it's as if you're kind of running legendary with a normal build. And then several other links going through. But the entirety of the recommended build list is here, as basically any build that is in here, I stand behind and I think is well worth at least trying out and maybe even having. It isn't per se laid out in an order. Within a section, the higher the build is, the more I recommend it a little bit, but that's within just each of the sections. But yeah, going from top to bottom, because some builds, for instance, more the healers are more towards the bottom. But yeah, those are still well worth having, some PFEs here as well. Then if we go to the other file, which is this recommended weapons and talents file, in here I'm doing exactly that again, but then here for talents and weapons. So in this top section, we have per weapon class, going from assault rifles all the way to marksman rifles there. Recommended talents. So talents I would pick with as well a little bit of an explainer why we're kind of picking them. The higher up it is in this list, the more I would kind of recommend it. And as you kind of notice, killer is, for instance, pretty high up there. Streamlined is up there as well, and then kind of goes lower and lower, although some are situational, because for instance, things like sadist can be the top picks, but situationally. Then we also go into some weapons here, and the weapons are in the same as well. The higher up it is, overall, the more I would recommend it. Recommendation doesn't mean better. It is more just as well. These are basically based on my understanding of the game, together with, for instance, yeah, the DPS and sustain tables. But it's not just that. It's also, as we talk about handling and such in here, it is also based on just me playing with these things. In here, we also include some of the exotics and such. Now, something being higher than the other doesn't per se, yeah, again, mean better. There's, with each of these, an explainer paragraph in there. So you can kind of understand what they're about. But also, yeah, we have a color-coded scheme and 6 metrics that we're comparing most of the weapons on. And as we go through them as well, so it's going from great, above average, average, below average. That's the 4 gradings for most of these. And With that, we're also color coding them, so we can quite easily see that, for instance, the Lexington has great burst DPS, and then everything else is kind of green and like one average up there. The FAMAS, even though it's the second place and has great burst DPS and great RPM, that's kind of the traits of it, but everything else is kind of below average as we have it here. And yeah, that is kind of to quickly indicate, what the strengths and weaknesses of several of the weapons are as we go through here. Every weapon in this list I would consider running if it's included in here. Some situationally, of course, some kind of are tied to certain builds or certain content a little bit. But all the weapons in here, I would say, are well worth considering. But that doesn't also mean that if it's not on the list, you definitely shouldn't use it. I just had to, we just had to draw a line somewhere and stop including things. Also, I've in between time, quite often I'll change my mind and move one thing like one up, one down or something, swap places. So this build list as well kind of changes with time, although we haven't had many rebalances recently, so not much has changed recently to it. But as well, in the future, if things change, and that's always what I do, at the start of every season, I will definitely, the build collection gets a little bit of an update, as for instance, as well, you see there's a space here ready for the tipping skills, and we've moved some stuff around. The recommended build list and the recommended weapons and talents list, if things change and new talents come in that are valuable, I'll add them in, usually at the start of a season. And next up, we go to another one of my Google Drive folders, which is the burst and sustain tables. In these burst and sustain tables, I keep and maintain a set of, as stated, burst and sustain tables. What those are these. So for instance, for every weapon type, and especially as well, here at the bottom, we have actually a bunch of tabs. As on spreadsheets, the tabs are at the bottom, which is a thing that you don't know till you know. And in here, for instance, we have all of the weapons listed by their burst, their sustain, their damage per mag, and then for some weapon types as well, for instance, fast hands comparisons. For instance, the MMRs, we have it differently where we're comparing them with their base damages because that's the metric we care about, generally the metric that we kind of care about. And these are the base values, so these do not, for instance, include the differences in mods that some of the weapons has. That's also why I exclude actually the exotics, because of course exotics have their own talents and such. We give them their own section basically. But from here we can already deduce a lot of things. Generally as well, if there is a weapon with one mod less, we have that included in their name, for instance here. And that, of course, does make a difference when we take it onto a build. But this is especially here for the base values. Here as well, we have the base values for their damage for all of the weapons, their RPMs, their mag sizes. The reloads, though, actually do include the watch points because I just take these from in the game. And in the game, I don't have any characters without watch points. But also that's the value that I would care about because most people will eventually get to 1000 and then those values are the ones that kind of matter there. Together with that, in the burst and sustain tables, then we have, as we talked about, it changes when we put it on a build. So then we also have that. We have basically here several big spreadsheets, and these are on basically all of the weapon classes on different style of builds, although the first three are kind of the same build, being strikers, some rifles, some shotguns, and some pistols, although those three are under different builds, for instance. But we have big tables that include all of the talents and such on top. And these are actually very useful tools. I really wanted to make them. They took a lot of time to make. And yeah, each time as well, updating them takes quite a bit of time. But well worth it because in here we can kind of compare talents on build. And especially as well between exotics and such. The thing is though, you have to kind of pay, it's very easy to just look at this and go like, oh, Striker is the best weapon because of that stuff. No, there is a lot of conditionality going on, of course. For instance, here as well, one of the top talents that kind of pops up here is Sadist, just because it's a 30% amp by itself. But of course, Sadist we can't have perfect uptime on. Neither on Killer, which needs to be activated. That's also why some of these are in between brackets showing with active, whereas some others are, for instance, strength out here, we have it averaged, and same, for instance, with measured, we have it averaged out. So you have to kind of consider the uptime of things, and that's also what this generally is. This is basically data, and I have several videos on a lot of these, going through them, and that's generally what I use them for. You have to kind of understand the game a little bit to analyze these. But yeah, they are very handy tools. But be careful in how you how you use them. Just going in here and going, oh, say this is the best talent. No, that's not how that works. But once you kind of understand that, yeah, stuff like that has uptime. We also have, for instance, at the bottoms here, the no talent version of those weapons. So basically when killer isn't active, it's a no talent version, of course. And then when it is active, it is with killer active. And then I don't want to really go into how much uptime I feel killer has, because that's going to be different per even player and build and content, and if you're solo or in a group, or if you're doing, you know, if you're fighting a singular hunter, or if you're just doing a normal mission where you get 1,000 kills. So because of that, we don't actually include that into here because it would just become a little bit of a mess. But we have that, yeah, we have these for all of the weapon types, and then mostly generally as well with a build that kind of fits them as well. And soft spot, I actually have added into most of them. The pistol and the MMR one are the only ones that haven't been updated yet, but they'll come. There's also actually even a Division 1 version of the base tables here, because, yeah, I kind of play Division 1 a little bit now, and, yeah, wanted to have these as a list like this wasn't generally available. There's also a little bit of a guide in here about burst and sustain, somewhat older one. This is really from years and years ago, but it explains the basics and is well worth a read through if you have the time. And let's go into my guides folder here. In here, I have a bunch of guides, and several are well worth knowing about. Especially, for instance, if you've ever wondered how to spawn the snitch, I have a guide on that. How kind of loot and in-game time and such works. We also have a weapon damage calculation guide, together with some quirks going through it, a specialization guide, a skills guide, which I actually still need to turn into a video at some point, which has been done for quite a while, but still haven't turned it into a video yet. We have a countdown guide. A descent guide is under construction, but has been for quite a while. I need to kind of get back to it. A macros guide with macros for PC players, for instance, and then also actually we have a weapons types and classes guide. This is actually one of the things that led into the weapon talents or the recommended weapons list and such. In here, for instance, I do have actually all of the weapon types and classes, and kind of as well. In here, we're kind of sorting them as well with recommendations. For instance, the lower it is within a class, the less I would recommend it, but explains as well, for instance, yeah, when we have weapons, multiple weapons that kind of are similar, what the differences between them are. For instance, within most of the weapons, it's usually that they just have a little bit of a stability difference. So the recoil pattern is usually a little bit different. And then as well, actually, I have a timetable guide that I'm kind of under construction on as well, which likely will come in not too long a time. And as well, actually, wrong text guides, which will get an update pretty soon, as, yeah, we have some wrong text around for a while. But this one, for instance, is also really handy to know about for knowing which texts are wrong. For instance, Striker being total weapon damage, which it isn't, and kind of explains all those. All of these guides are very, yeah, I try to keep them up to date, especially as well. We'll give a pass over as we do have a new season. These haven't been updated yet, but in here as well, I do have an exotic and a named items and weapons guide explaining some of the issues that exist, which shouldn't anymore. For instance, Catharsis and Blue Screen in the patch notes, they specifically call them out as fixed, together as well with the Busy Little Bee and the Mosquito no longer being tied to the Liberty, for instance. So, but I'm still doing some final checks and such, and we'll update these pretty soon, especially as well. In the named one, this is one that I quite often share around as well. It explains about PvP and DZ items, basically that some call PvP exclusives or DZ exclusives. They're not really exclusive to the DZ, so I don't use that term that much. But in here as well, we do have listed, for instance, which weapons and gear are tied to the DZ. So for instance, from here, you can kind of easily see which items those are, so that, yeah, you don't go countdowning for, let's say, a Devil's Due, because you won't get one. All of these are, yeah, very handy to have. And also with all of these, together with all of the spreadsheets and such, they are actually shareable through just a link. So if somebody needs this information, you can also just, for instance, link them directly to a guide by just copying the URL of the guide, the web page that you're on, and just sending it to them. That will get them to it really quick. as we'll come to my last link of the bunch. And in here, I have my damage/DPS calculators. These are the ones that you may have seen already with build showcases and such, as usually I have a few stacked on top of each other, but this is a single one. These are the multi-calculators, as I kind of call them. This one is for instance, DPS, and we can just, by filling in these fields down here, together with the weapon stats up here, we can actually get DPS calculations and burst DPS, sustained DPS, and my damage per mag calculations out of them. And they are very easy to kind of fill in. There's also a video on my channel kind of going over how to fill these in if you're interested. What you have to do, though, is to copy them to your own Google Drive so that you can't, of course, enter anything on these. Basically, they're locked in my folder, but you can just copy them from there. And then you can enter data into them. And it's pretty easy. You just fill in whatever is basically on your build. And with this as well, you can very easily compare builds together. And nowadays as well, we have one for headhunting as well, and we have one for skill builds together with that. The quick calculator is in here as well. I have one for Division 1, but then also we have actually weapon talent ones. I don't use these that often anymore. We usually just finagle the weapon talents into the multi-calculators, but actually these are very useful to have as well, where one is for perfect weapon talents and one is for normal weapon talents. When we go into here, where we can input one build into here as well, together with its weapon stats, and then what we can get out is actually all of the talents kind of overlaid on top of it. And from that, we can kind of, look at the burst, the sustained DPS and such, and kind of come to some conclusions. And these are very handy to have and to use because they give you answers, for instance, for some builds of what are some of the weapons, talents that I should go with. These basically answer those pretty well. And there is a video on my channel going into these and explaining how to fill them out and where all of the stats kind of come from and some of the simple things that you could run into if you do use them. But well worth grabbing some of these. And let's go into some other people's links and such as well here. And we'll start here with one of the big ones, which is the gear spreadsheet, as it is called. I often call this the Discord spreadsheet, as a lot of people from the Discord work on this, of the official Discord. And in here, there are a lot of tabs at the bottom here. Again, on spreadsheets, the tabs are at the bottom. And in these tabs, there's a lot of useful information. So actually, in the second tab of it is hubs and builds. And in here, there's a lot of build guides, and actually as well, a lot of other people's build guides. I can definitely recommend some of Rossi's one, which are actually written out guides, which can be actually more useful to newer players because it explains some of the choices and such. But of course, my build pictures are also designed and intended as well in that way to be a little bit more for more advanced players, but also very simple and just, from one view, you can kind of get everything. I specifically don't want to make guides like that, but also, others already do that. And especially everything by Rossi here and others, I can definitely recommend here because this is kind of curated pretty well. My build collection is in here as well, together with some of my other tools and such as well. And as well, actually, a lot of the links I'll be using today are in here, so you could find them through here. As well, they have a weapon table. This is actually, so where my weapon table, my DPS tables are actually, for instance, with the reload side of things, together with the watch points from the from a character. These are the base stats, actually. So while the base stats of the base weapon damage and such, that will be, of course, the same across all of these. But for instance, the reload and such isn't. And as well, they usually use the base magazine size here. So this is truly the base amounts for those weapons. And especially for some of the reloads and such, I quite often come here. They also have a extensive list of all of the weapon talents, all of the gear talents, all of the gear sets and what they do. So you can just kind of read through this, especially if you're maybe like returning or such, and see, hey, last time I was here, what is this final measure or measured assembly? I called it the Division 1 name, but you can kind of read through here. And of course, all of the talents are here, all of the weapons, named weapons and named gear, and also all of the exotics are in here as well. As a simple tip as well, is you can do Control F. If you're using this on a PC, if you do Control F, you can, for instance, search for, let's say, Bighorn, and yeah, then it will highlight and jump to that. So with a Control F, you can quickly find what you're looking for, as that's just a find it within the file. But yeah, this has all of the stats as well for all of these. And actually, quite recently, I helped out a little bit by helping clean out a little bit here, as there was a lot of flavor text and such missing, as for instance as well, we have all of the flavor text from all of the gear and weapons in here. And yeah, these are very useful things to very much. This is one of the links that I come to basically, yeah, every other day in general. As you can go through all of these tabs and yeah, check them out, as there's a lot of information in here. And for instance, as well, just quick reference of like what brand has what as its second and third stats here in the brand sets tab. Yeah, this is unmatched. And next up, we'll have this other gear attribute sheet. And this one I quite often call the Reddit sheet, as it's mostly from people that are much more active on the Reddit and in the unofficial Discord. Although this one has not been updated in a while. So actually, the last time this has been updated is about a year ago. But there is some data in here and information that, yeah, the other places don't have, so we still come to it, and it is handy to have, especially for Descent. For instance, in here it does have all of the rotations and which talents are in there, and then as well what talents add per step. But you have to watch out, as yeah, some of the data is out of date. So for instance, the reward table here for Descent, yeah, this has been changed since this, and has been increased quite heavily, because yeah, for instance, nowadays on loop 30 it's a guaranteed reconstructed, and then several chances before that. But a lot of things in here are still worth looking at, but you have to watch out, because anything of gear and weapons, especially the gear changes and such, haven't made it through into here, nor the rebalances of weapons and such. But especially for that Descent, and then also some of the exotics, this hasn't also per se been updated. But this, from here, you can actually understand, for instance, how the dropping of exotics works, even though I have a guide on it as well, which you can go to the guide section earlier, as I have a loot sources guide. But this, for instance, kind of, if you kind of look through these, you can kind of understand that, oh, okay, so there is a targeted loot system for it. There's exotic caches that it can drop from. And then also, for instance, raid incursion, and then from the drop rates and such, a lot of those are consistent through the game. This one, definitely watch out with some of the information from it, because yeah, for instance, the weapon tables especially are no longer up to date. And yeah, you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble that way. As I'm trying to, oh yeah, base weapon. For instance, these tables are no longer up to date, very much not. But yeah, especially for those Descent and such, this can still be useful. And next up, we go to the vendor site here. And this one nowadays isn't updated as regularly and as quickly as a lot of us would want, but it still gets updated usually. And in here, you can come and see actually what all the items on the vendors are. A handy thing as well in here is especially to know about, yeah, Control F. If you Control F through here and just, for instance, type out, let's say, Haven. We have the Haven vendor there, of course. And yeah, that this can be very useful for just checking if it was this week that one item was there, or if it's last week. The thing to keep in mind, though, is to check actually the date up here. And if it's the last updated, will always be listed up here. And yeah, if it is, if it is Tuesday right now, as the reset on the vendors and such happens on Tuesday, and this hasn't been updated yet, yeah, it might be the previous version. Although, of course, you can just also check one vendor and see if it lines up. If the, Cassie, or well, not per se Cassie maybe, but let's say, for instance, the countdown vendor, if it doesn't have a cloak in there, that's maybe not this week's inventory showing up here. But overall, a very handy tool to have, as especially for just checking quickly if, for instance, some of the talents are there. Soft spot came in, for instance. You can Control F here for soft spot and see if there's any of them on the vendors. Together with that as well, you can just quickly read through here. Going through the vendors, of course, as well, in-game just doesn't take that long, but this on top of it is a very handy tool. Next up, let's go to some maps, as they are very handy to have, of course, as well. Here we're going to division2map.com, and on this one, especially for instance, finding all of the comms and such, that can be very useful. As a tip for this site, as it's kind of, as we see here, a little bit cluttered when we start here, I would recommend just doing hide all and then picking one of the categories. So for instance, here we'll pick echoes, and these are all the echoes on the map. Whenever you click one of them as well, it will actually show the name of it and such, and a little bit of a description. Some of them even have pictures kind of showing where they exactly are. And this is a very handy tool because of that, for the echoes, for the artifacts, for the comms. You can just come into here and just find them together with as well. If you're maybe stuck on a SHT tech puzzle, they usually as well kind of explain how to get to them. This also does have New York and Brooklyn, but its Brooklyn is not fully complete. For instance, it doesn't have any of, if we do hide all here again, and for instance, do the comms, it's actually showing none in Brooklyn and such. So that's also what we'll be showing another site here in a second. But yeah, this one especially as well for instance, the named enemy spawns, for instance, in New York here is very useful. So these areas where they can spawn are kind of marked here. And this is a very handy tool to have. Together then for the Brooklyn side of things, because while it does have some of the things in Brooklyn, so for instance, the Hunter puzzles and the SHD caches and techs, SHD tech caches, for instance here, it doesn't have the comms and the echoes. For that, we also have this other side, which is strapazon at github.io. I'll link, of course, to all of these in down below. This one then has actually all of those. And it's, as you can see, kind of laid out in a similar fashion, except the UI is on the right, just to make it enough different. Copy their homework, but make it enough different. But this one does have the comms and such as well. And that way, you can just, for instance, hide all and then just have, for instance, the comms here. If you're missing a comm, you can kind of cross-reference to this list and try to find that. Also, these can be actually handy for the hunters. Both of them actually have a full guide here, for instance, where you can click through to a full guide and, for instance, for all of the hunters and such. So these are good sites to come for those. And next up, we'll go into a trio of build tools to just put together builds and just basically run the theoreticals before you put them together. Here we'll start with Scooby's one, as this is the build tool, a spreadsheet that you can fill it into. I'll link to the Reddit post by Scooby. And every season he puts out a fresh one. This one is already updated to year 7, season 2. So up to date, and very well made together spreadsheet here. If we click through the link, we go to this Google folder. You do have to copy it, as with all of these Google files, basically. If you want to edit them, you have to copy them to your own Google Drive, unless you have permission, but usually you don't. But you can definitely make you can make a copy from it and edit that one. So I've already done that. I've brought one to my own Google Drive here. And when we open it up, we have first the welcome screen here and also some of the known issues. So you can, from here, if some stuff might not be working exactly correctly, and they're all listed here, although actually looking through it, it's all headhunter stuff, which understandable. This originally was actually a version that was made by somebody else, and there was a Japanese version actually. Somebody translated it all, but then both of them are basically, they've kind of disappeared from the community. But Scooby has been maintaining this for seasons upon seasons at this point, and adding to it and doing a pretty bang up job about it. And here we also, on the second tab here, just behind my head, we have tutorial, and that is a video tutorial that it links to, so you can actually go to there. But it's actually so simple to use that, I feel you can do without. The first time you load it up, you do need to give it access to load up all of the graphics and such. The first time you change anything on it, it will do that. But then from there, we can actually, whenever we click any of these things, we can, for instance, add in some of the pieces. You do have to watch out. It does allow, for instance, yeah, to have multiple exotics and such. It won't per se stop you. But yeah, just if you do it smartly, yeah, we can just make, for instance, a quick whatever build together. All of the brands are here. All of the talents are here. And you just basically input all of that and just put your build in here. For it, it will spit out a burst DPS and such, and a sustained DPS as well. And yeah, you can also even play around with what is and isn't active on the build. And this is a very powerful tool once you get the hang of it. It is very, very, very useful just sticking your own build into here, getting these numbers out, playing around with some of the talents and seeing what the results from those are, even much more so than, for instance, using a damage calculator or such. And yeah, this is very much a powerful tool. Also, once you actually have your build in here, one of the best things about it is it spits out a build overview like this. And you may have already seen, for instance, some people use, especially the left side here, to showcase their build. It's very clean, very, very nice layout, and very easy to see exactly what is there. I've quite often actually considered moving the build collection to being pictures of this. Thing is though that, yeah, this would be very time consuming on my end, so I've decided not to. But yeah, for your own usages and such, yeah, definitely consider grabbing this. Also in here, we do also have a brand listing as well. Just if you need to check what the brands list are, there's a tab for that, together as well with all of the weapon stats that it's using and also has out here, so you can kind of compare together with that. This is a very powerful tool and one that you can kind of load up on your own computer and just play around with it. Then we have also some online ones. Next up, we go to Mxswat.github.io, and this is one of the online build tools. As much as I like Scooby's one, especially, yeah, the output that I can give is very nice looking. Yeah, the downsides are you do need to copy it to your own Google Drive and such. This one is, for instance, all the way online. With this as well, yeah, you just come to the site, you can pick here at the top a specialization, and then together with that, just clicking any of the slots will bring up this UI where you can select a weapon into it. One handy thing is to know is also there's a search tab up here. So usually the easier way to do it is especially if you're, well, it kind of depends. If you're just trying to put together a build and you want to look through a list and go like, oh, maybe I stick a Strega in here. But if you just know what you want to have in there, so if I want a FAMAS, I'm just going to type in FAMAS, and then we get a FAMAS 2010 in there. And this can be very fast for putting the gear together as well. And this will also give you a link as once you have everything in place, you can just share actually the link of the URL to other people for them to see this exact build as well. It is basically filling into that URL as we go along. And it can be very easy to, for instance, yeah, through here, go and just do some striker and then just add the minor attributes and such and the mods and very quickly lay out the build. In here as well, it'll spit out most of your basic stats. Together with that as well, it will spit out a damage table here where we can kind of see and compare. For instance, here we have the two weapons that we have here. And this is actually one of the really handy things of this one, where we can kind of compare weapons very easily against each other. This one is definitely worth using as well, but from the same people, actually, we also have the BuildStation. Now, the BuildStation is a newer one, and I'll, of course, be linked down below as well. This one kind of works in a similar fashion. We have kind of a similar layout as we see here. We can click things, and then it pops it all up. It is graphically a little bit more interesting, as we see here. Everything is kind of available, and we see actually the visuals of the gear. Again, it's somewhat easier as well to spot which one, because you don't have to read. You just kind of go like, oh yeah, that's a Carbine 7, but that's a drill. But that's a Carbine 7 if I want the Carbine 7 in there. You can add the stats in, and then it basically just goes in as is, together with putting in the talents and such. So that is this one as well is a very powerful tool. This one actually as a handiness as well. You don't even need to click the search. If you click a slot and then go, for instance, and then start typing, it will instantly be in the search. So it will go, for instance, yeah, if we want to make an ongoing build, we can go do that. And then you basically fill in the stat and then close it out. This one as well has a feature where you can save some of these loadouts to basically your account. And then likely in the future, they're, from what I understand, thinking about actually just making, for instance, a way of people share. Well, you can already share it through here, but for people, they're being basically a registry and people can upvote and downvote things as well. This as well has a calculator built into it as well, where you can calculate the damages and such. And yeah, this is also a very, very powerful tool to use. Next up, we go to a specific one, actually a fresh one, as this is hot off the presses. This is the blueprint guide by Dog, by Dog Nuts, but I'll just refer to them as Dog. Yeah, they've been a valued part of the community, and they have actually recently made this blueprint guide. And this is actually very handy because, yeah, blueprints have been an issue for a long while. Here, with the first page of it, explains a bunch of things together as well, with the new exotic blueprints as well, their drop rates, and also that table that they showed with the patch notes. And also kind of explains why, yeah, some of the blueprint counters have been wrong over time, and also what the issues still are, for instance. But as we go through it, going here through the tabs, it is actually very handy because it explains exactly where some of the blueprints will come from and what things do and don't have a blueprint, making it very easy. For instance, coming through here, that we see that, yeah, if I want to craft a sitar, that doesn't have a blueprint. And actually the notes at the bottom here actually explain the thing that we're kind of looking at. Some of these are marked with a tiny 1 at the end, some with a tiny 3. The 3 means the blueprint doesn't exist, and those are also crossed out as we see there. The 1s are from Descent, or well, from Reconstructed Caches, which no longer is only Descent, because also in this one, as we go to the exotics here at the end, this does include all of the exotic ones here, and also the ones that are missing, for instance, in each category, because that's also important. And especially as well in that final one, if we scroll all the way to the right, we see that we have Reconstructed Caches as we go all the way to the right there. And yeah, this is a very handy tool to come to, especially if you're maybe not at the computer, but you want to know, hey, is there a mask? Is there a Grupo mask, for instance, available as for building? And we can see from here that it isn't. Some of the ones as well, the ones with the red backgrounds, as we see here, these are explained as a blueprint exists but no longer obtainable. These are the season locked ones. So these are the ones where if you were there with the season, and we see that with Heartbreaker, Hunt's Fury, and Rigor here, for instance, and Empress Spellstone and Usina, if you weren't there for those seasons, these have not correctly been added to the blueprint pool. And yeah, this can be a very handy tool to kind of check, yeah, what is and isn't, for instance, yeah, in the Reconstructed Caches, in the main pools, and where to get some of the items, because it isn't always that clear, of course, from the game. A very handy tool, and one that I'm very happy that got made recently, as yeah, this will help a lot by keeping track of, yeah, what does and doesn't have blueprints, and also which ones may not be available to everybody. Because, yeah, for instance, the Hunter's Fury piece is still not being available to everybody with just having the blueprints. That can make a difference for when I recommend, for instance, some Hunter Fury builds. Although we can go farm for them, of course, because everything is kind of in targeted loot, especially, well, when it comes to at least the brands. With the exception of Yao and System Corruption, of course. But yeah, this is a very handy tool to have. And next up, we'll come to the Trello boards for the Division 2. Trello is just an service that provides basically, it's kind of like Teams, basically, where multiple people can keep track of things and kind of address things. It's a board, basically. But the Division uses their systems here. And especially what we get here is for the patch notes, for some things show up in here. Now, the main season ones, they usually make a page for on the Division website. But for instance, the patches in between, so the seasonal ones, the 0.1, the 0.2s, and the 0.3s, those usually show up here. Also, some of the things that are issues will show up here. So for instance, the recent kerfuffle with the Tempest is actually here and it's in progress. They have moved it beyond investigating. And usually it explains kind of a thing about it and then also if it's going in or not. And we can also, for instance, here see that some things do have a fix already. So for instance, here, the workaround for the stash issue. Well, actually, this has come to pass already because this is for the current season, which already started, of course. But this is actually a very handy place to come and check what exists as known issues and what they're kind of aware of. Together with that as well, there are some won't fixes, which are all the way on the right there. Some issues have been considered and just been like, it's not worth fixing them, so they've just said no to that. But yeah, this is a very handy one to know, especially for those patch notes. They show up usually up in here. And lastly, we'll go to a big one, but one that is kind of, a tool upon itself, a whole wide web of its own, which is Discord. Now here I'll link especially to my own Discord because obviously, but there are a lot of Discords that are actually very useful to know about. Here I'll link to my own, and especially as well here, some more resources exist as well, as I have my own resources linked here in IKEA's resources, but also in the general resources. I try to keep especially graphics and such that I find useful here. For instance, here being the costs for expertise. Most of these are made by other people, especially if they're in the general resources. They're not per se made by me. Otherwise, they would show in the IKEA resources. But there's actually a lot of interesting information to be had around Discords. And as well, notably, I would say the official Discord is one to keep in mind, as well as, for instance, server maintenances and such usually show up in here. There's also, for instance, it keeps up with the Division tweets. And of course, there's a whole wide community that if you can't find an answer for what you're looking for within, my things or other people's things, or if you just need even more build advice, there's a whole channel for that. And especially the Division community, I quite enjoy being part of it, as it is very wholesome. And yeah, there are people helping out. There are some dicks about as well, but yeah, every community has some. Overall, though, the community is very helpful, especially people hanging around on the official Discord and even on the Reddit Discord, the unofficial Discord. If you have some questions about some builds, some way that some talents interacts and such, what is, recommended and such, you could always go to a lot of them. There are also a lot of community Discords that exist, and where you can, for instance, as well, go and sign up for, being, either joining their clans or such, or for instance, even just signing up to run with them into legendaries, into incursions, into raids and such. I won't link to everything here, of course, but especially if you go to any of these Discords and just ask around, for instance, for some of those things, you will usually get an answer. But yeah, overall, Discord is a very helpful tool to have, especially, of course, if you're on the PC end of things. But even nowadays, of course, it works really well with PlayStation and Xbox as well. And going around and looking, especially even lurking in some of these. For me, a lot of the things that I've learned over the years, starting out with Division, I've just been lurking in the official Discord and just reading along and going like, oh, that's how that works, because somebody else asked it and somebody else answered it. And I went like, oh, okay, I've learned that now. So yeah, it is a very invaluable tool. And yeah, it is definitely worth hanging around some of these Discords. And thus we come to the end of this long rambling talk, going over all of these links. But yeah, very useful ones, I would say. I use these quite often myself. So yeah, I can wholeheartedly recommend them to others as well. And there is a lot of information out there about the Division. And this was kind of the point of this video, just to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same pages, on the same internet pages in this case, so that you know where to look for some of the things. As Division is a complex game. It's not as complex as some but definitely worth having some outside tools to help along. And again, everything will of course be linked down below, so you can go check it all out. And if you have some more interesting links as well, feel free to add them into the comment section if you feel that they should be here. And maybe we'll do a follow-up one and we'll gather up all of those and make a follow-up one to this one somewhere in the future. But yeah, for now, thank you all for joining me. In the future, we're going to go actually into that tipping skills in-depth look, as actually it is an interesting set and has changed my mind about some of the ways that we want to lay it out since we last saw it in the PTS. Not that the build has, well, not that the gear set has changed, but actually the build that I want to make from it has changed a little bit, mostly surrounding the diminishing returns we have basically on crit chance, crit damage. So we're going to make some different choices there. But yeah, that'll be in the future. I hope you join me for that one. If you did enjoy this video, please do any and all of the algorithm things down below. It does help out. So I'll do that little bit of shilling here. Hope to catch you all in the future. And as always, have a good night.